The events you're about to see are based on real accounts. To protect the identities of those involved, names and details have been changed. My name is Luke Jensen. I am 34 years old and I live in Westfield, Indiana. This happened about 5 years ago, but to this day I can't explain what happened that day. I always thought these horror stories were exaggerated until I had an experience that turned my life upside down. I'm not one for superstitions, but what I went through still gives me chills just thinking about it. That day, I was home alone, as I always was on Wednesdays. My wife, Emma, always had work meetings in the evening, so I would take the opportunity to watch something or play video games with not much else to do. It was a cold autumn night and the wind was howling outside. I was on the couch watching a movie on Netflix and the whole house was too quiet. You know that uncomfortable silence you feel but try to ignore? Well, that's exactly what I felt. But as I said, I tried not to pay too much attention to it. But the feeling was there, spreading through the house as if something was about to happen. The first strange thing was the sound. At first, I thought it was the wind hitting the windows, but the noise was more constant, as if someone was walking around the house. The thing is, I was alone, and all the doors were closed. I had the habit of locking everything when Emma left, so there was no reason to think someone was there. I didn't pay much attention at first, after all. Maybe it was just an old house making noise, right? But the sound didn't stop, and it seemed to be getting closer to where I was. That made me a little uneasy. I decided to go to the kitchen, thinking that maybe it was the wind making the doors shake or some other silly noise. When I walked by the dining room, I noticed something strange. The chair was turned over. I didn't remember leaving it that way. And even stranger, the table seemed disturbed, as if something had been dragged across it, but nothing had fallen. The feeling of unease grew stronger, and I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. That's when the phone rang. The sound of the ringtone startled me. It was Emma, but when I answered, the silence on the other end made my heart race. She wasn't speaking, just breathing heavily. I started calling her name, but she didn't say anything. When I realized the silence was taking over, I hung up and stood there, thinking about what was happening. Then, the phone rang again, but this time it was from an unknown number. It wasn't common for someone to call me at that hour, so curious, I picked up. The voice was distorted, as if it had been filtered through some effect, but I could still hear a whisper, "You shouldn't have looked at the chair." I froze. The phrase was spoken with a calm, eerie tone. I didn't know what it meant, but suddenly everything felt much more real. I went to the landline and started looking up if this had any significance. If I were more sensible, I probably wouldn't have done that, but curiosity got the better of me. I found an article talking about strange events in old houses, things that happened when you least expected them, and it mentioned the word chair in a very specific way. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and every time I tried to look around the house, it felt like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. I was starting to get paranoid, but the worst was yet to come. The lights began to flicker, not just once or twice, but several times in a way that seemed synchronized, as if something was happening beyond my control. And in the midst of that, a whisper once again, but now closer, as if it was coming from some corner of the room where no one was. "Go back to the chair, go back." With each word that echoed in the air, my mind became more confused. I knew I shouldn't, but something was pulling me toward it. What was wrong with this chair? What was it? I didn't know, but still, I found myself walking toward the dining room. The light flickered one last time before going out completely. I was in the dark, with only the light from the street coming through the window. Fear consumed me, but at the same time I was completely hypnotized. Something wasn't right. I reached the chair. It was facing the table, but it wasn't alone anymore. A piece of paper was on the table. There was no reason for it to be there. I crouched down to look closer, and when I saw what was written, my heart almost stopped. The paper simply said, "I saw you." I didn't know what to do, and the moment I read those words, I felt such a strong chill that my whole body trembled. And at that exact moment, all the lights in the house turned on all at once, making the shock even greater. I looked around, feeling like I was trapped somewhere. I couldn't breathe. The silence returned, but not the normal silence. It was a muffled, oppressive silence, as if something was around me that I couldn't see. I went to the phone to call Emma, but before I could dial, Emma's number appeared on the screen again. This time her voice was clear, and unlike the first call, she was frantic. "Luke, don't go into the dining room. Please don't go in. I can't warn you again. It's too late." I tried to answer, but the line was cut. I don't know how, but it was at that moment that an invisible force pushed me toward the dining room door. I didn't want to, but my body moved on its own, as if it was being guided. I entered the room, but as I looked at the chair, everything was silent again. There was nothing more, just the echo of my breath and the overwhelming feeling that something was watching me. And then everything stopped. The house returned to normal. The lights came back on, the phone stopped ringing, and the silence was absolute. But something inside me changed that day. What happened? I'll never understand. I don't know what that was, but what I experienced was real. Today, 5 years later, I still wonder if anyone else has gone through something like this. My name is Travis. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I was never the type to believe in these things, but what happened to me and my wife a few years ago still gives me chills whenever I think about it. We'd always wanted a dog. After moving to a house with a decent yard, we decided to adopt a puppy. We chose a black Labrador from a local shelter and named him Cooper. He was full of energy, playful, and loved to run around the yard. During the day, he was just a normal dog, getting into typical puppy mischief. But at night, well, that's when things started to get weird. In the first week, Cooper started acting a little strange every night, around 11 p.m. He would sit in the middle of the living room, staring intently at an empty corner. After a few seconds, he'd start wagging his tail and doing those excited little jumps, like he was calling someone to play. At first, we thought it was cute. But as the days went by, it started to feel a little more off. He'd bark softly, roll around on the floor, and even lift his front paws as if he were playing with someone invisible. I tried to brush it off, but my wife Amanda began to get uneasy. She was the first to ask if I thought it was strange. "Don't you think this is weird, Travis?" she asked one night. I told her that maybe he was just seeing something in the corner, maybe a bug or a noise coming from the street, but I didn't really believe that myself. Something about Cooper's behavior was definitely off. And what was even stranger was that he seemed so happy, so excited, like he was interacting with something that only he could see. One night, things escalated. We were watching TV when Cooper started doing it again. This time, he ran to a corner of the room and jumped, like he had jumped on someone. But the floor there was wood, and when he landed, we heard a second sound, like another weight had fallen at the same time. I turned off the TV immediately and stared at the corner, trying to figure out what was going on. Amanda grabbed my hand tightly. That's when we heard it. Softly, almost imperceptibly, but definitely there. A child's laugh. It wasn't the TV. It wasn't a sound from outside. It came from inside the room, near Cooper. My blood went cold. Amanda started mumbling, something like, "Did you hear that?" And I just nodded. Cooper, on the other hand, was having the time of his life, running back and forth like it was the best game in the world. After that night, I started paying closer attention. I decided to test something. I placed a ball on the floor before going to bed. In the morning, it was always somewhere else, far from where I had left it. I never saw Cooper pick it up, and it didn't make sense for him to play alone and then go back to sleep in the same corner of the room. The situation got tenser. I started watching Cooper more carefully, but whenever he did that strange play behavior, the atmosphere in the room felt heavier, like something was approaching us. A sense of discomfort hung in the air, something we couldn't define, but it was there, watching us. At night, we couldn't sleep peacefully anymore. The sound of the child's laugh echoed in our minds, and even if it stopped, we knew it was there, waiting. Amanda began to distance herself from Cooper. She was scared that somehow the dog was possessed or that it was a sign of something very wrong. But in my mind, I was trying to rationalize everything. There must be an explanation, I thought. It must be just a coincidence. The problem was that the coincidences were stacking up in an increasingly unsettling way. So one day, I decided to record it. I left my phone filming while we were in the bedroom. When I watched it the next day, I almost dropped the phone. The video showed the ball rolling slowly by itself across the floor. Cooper was watching and then running after it, picking it up and dropping it like someone had thrown it for him. Amanda was terrified. She wanted to sell the house, get rid of the dog, anything to make it stop. But I didn't even know how to explain what was happening. The house was old, but we had never heard anything about haunted stories. I started researching on the internet, but I couldn't find anything about previous owners or anything that explained it. The climax came one night. I woke up to Cooper whimpering and the sound of something scraping against the floor in the living room. I got up slowly and peeked. The dog was standing there, staring at the same corner as always. But this time he wasn't wagging his tail. He looked scared. And then, again, that laugh. But this time it was louder. And I swear to God, I felt warm air near my ear, like someone had laughed right beside me. Amanda came running from the bedroom, terrified, saying she had dreamed of a child pulling Cooper across the yard. That night, we slept in the car. The next day, we took the dog to Amanda's parents' house. Interestingly, he didn't repeat this behavior there. He was like a different dog, completely normal. But when we brought him back home that same night, he started again, playing with someone. It went on like that for a few weeks until out of nowhere it stopped. No explanation. Cooper simply lost interest in that corner of the room. No more laughs, no more strange smells, nothing. It was like, I don't know, like whoever or whatever had been there just left. We sold the house a few years later, and we never had experiences like that again. But every now and then, when I see Cooper playing in the yard, I still wait for him to look at an empty corner and start wagging his tail again. And to be honest, I hope it never happens again. My name is Darren. I'm 38 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. What I'm about to tell you happened 5 years ago, but to this day I still can't understand what it was. I've never been someone who believed in paranormal things. I've always been skeptical, the type of person who thinks everything has a logical explanation. But after this experience, I don't know anymore. I have a cat named Milo. He has always been a calm cat, the type that likes to sleep on your lap, curl up next to you in bed. He followed me around the house all the time, a real clingy cat. Anyone who has a cat knows not all cats are that affectionate, but Milo was, until that night. That day, I went to bed late. I had been working until after midnight on my laptop, and when I finally lay down, sleep came quickly. But it was one of the strangest dreams I've ever had. In the dream, I was in my room, lying exactly as I had been in reality, but something was holding me in place. I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. And then I saw a shadow in the corner of the room. It didn't have a defined shape, but it was huge and seemed to slink across the ceiling. The worst part was the feeling. It wasn't just fear. It was like something was inside me. I felt my skin tingle as if something was crawling inside me. In the dream, I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. It was the most real thing I've ever felt while sleeping. When I finally managed to scream, I woke up. But something was wrong. Milo, who always slept at the foot of the bed, wasn't there. I turned my head and saw him in the corner of the room, curled up, his fur standing on end. When I tried to call him, he snarled at me. Yes, snarled. A low, guttural growl, as if I were a stranger. I was confused. He had never done that before. I slowly got up, trying to get closer, but he ran under the sofa. I spent almost an hour trying to lure him out with food, with treats, but he wouldn't come near me. That would have been strange enough, but things started to get worse in the following days. The next morning, I went to the bathroom and noticed the mirror was fogged up, as if someone had taken a hot shower. But I hadn't used the shower, and the weirdest part, there were marks on the mirror, as if fingers had slid across the glass. It was an odd pattern, as if someone had drawn on the mirror without intending to. I thought I was just getting paranoid because of the weird dream. But Milo kept acting strange. He avoided being in the same room as me. If I got close, he would arch his back, puff up his fur, and run away. On the third night, I woke up again with the feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. This time, it was different. I could move, but there was a weight on the bed, as if someone was sitting beside me. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. The mattress was sinking. I didn't want to look, but I did. And I swear, for a second, I saw an indentation there, as if something invisible had pressed down on the mattress. When I turned on the bedside lamp, there was nothing. After that, things started happening even during the day. Objects that I was sure about their location started appearing in different places. The lights flickered, but only when I was alone. The worst part was when I found the door to my closet open one night, with all my clothes thrown on the floor. Milo was hiding under the sofa, growling at nothing. I tried to find explanations. Maybe I was stressed, maybe Milo was sick, and I was just influenced by the weird dream. But then something happened that made me stop ignoring it. It was midnight. I had just fallen asleep when I was woken up by a loud noise. Something had fallen in the kitchen. I got up quickly, my heart racing. When I got there, I saw that one of the glasses from the cabinet had fallen and shattered on the floor. But the cabinet was closed. At that moment, I felt something behind me. A presence, heavy, oppressive. I turned quickly, expecting to see something, but there was nothing. The silence was absolute, and then I heard a sound that sent chills down my spine. Milo, hiding under the table, growling, staring at something I couldn't see. I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to invoke protection. I knew nothing. All I could do was stand there, trying to understand what was happening. After that night, things just stopped. Milo still took a few days to go back to normal, but gradually he started to come near me again. I never understood what happened. I never saw anything concrete. I never heard voices. Nothing physical hurt me. But that experience marked me in a way I can't explain. To this day, when I wake up in the middle of the night and see Milo staring at me from across the room, I get that chill down my spine. Because deep down, I'm afraid he's seeing something I can't see. I tried to do some research, look for explanations for what happened, and I found a few things that shook me more than helped. The stories about possessions and invading spirits that attack during sleep are old, but they never seemed real to me until I lived it. What scared me the most was that when I spoke to a friend who's a medium, I'm not really into that stuff, but I was desperate. He said that the presence might have been something I brought back from somewhere, a spirit that took possession of me, and that Milo in some way was able to sense. I don't know what to think. The strangest part is that after that period, things just stopped. There was no explanation, no more incidents. The cat went back to being the same, although he stayed much more reclusive for a while. But the worst part is that even to this day, whenever I'm alone, I feel that cold shiver as if something is watching me. Now, years later, all I can do is share what I went through. I don't have answers. I can't say for sure that possession happened or that something supernatural occurred. All I know is that dream and Milo's behavior left a mark on me in a way that makes me question everything I knew about the world around me. I don't know if any of you have experienced something similar or if you believe in it, but if anyone has a rational explanation, I'm all ears. Because the feeling of being watched, even today, doesn't leave me. And the doubt lingers. Was it just a nightmare? Or something real? I'll never know. And that's what makes me feel even more lost. My name is Malcolm and I am 54 years old. About 20 years ago, something happened that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. Back then, my grandmother Eleanor lived in a house far from the city, surrounded by huge trees and an eerie silence that was only broken by the sound of crickets and the wind rustling the branches at night. It was an old house, built by my great-grandfather, and our family always joked that it looked like something out of a horror movie, with narrow hallways, creaky wooden floors, and windows that let in the chill of the night. One of the strangest things about that house was an owl that would land on the windowsill of her room every night. No matter if it was raining, windy, or snowing, there it was. Always at the same time, just after sunset, that huge owl, with its glowing eyes, would land on the windowsill and stay there for a while, watching. My grandmother said it was a good omen, that owls brought protection, but I always found it odd. It didn't feel natural. It wasn't like any bird I had ever seen before. It wasn't afraid of us, and it never flew away when we moved around inside. The owl came every night, year after year. We got so used to it that we barely noticed anymore. When my grandmother started getting sick, my mother moved in temporarily to take care of her, and I would visit on weekends. Every time I arrived, there it was again, perched on the windowsill, still as a statue, its eyes tracking every movement inside the room. It made me uncomfortable. There was something about that bird that didn't sit right with me, but I didn't think too much about it. At least, not until the day my grandmother passed away. That morning, everything felt strange. The house was unnervingly quiet. There was no noise, no footsteps, no talking, nothing. But what disturbed me the most was that the owl didn't show up. For the first time in years, the windowsill was empty. It had always been there, day after day, night after night, as if it were part of the house itself. When my grandmother died, it simply disappeared. I didn't know what to make of it. My mom said, almost with a sense of relief, that maybe the bird was only there for her, and now that she was gone, it had left. The following days passed slowly and gloomily. We were organizing the funeral and going through the house, finding old items and keepsakes from the past. It was an emotionally draining task, but something felt even stranger with each passing day. As time went on, I began to feel like something was still in the house, lurking, watching. That first night after my grandmother passed away, I was in the guest room, trying to get some rest. I was exhausted. But then, in the middle of the night, I heard a soft sound, like a tapping, barely audible, but distinct enough to make me sit up in bed. I tried to ignore it, but the sound kept coming, steadily and consistently. It was coming from the window. I got up cautiously and went to the window, half expecting to see the owl there. But there was nothing. Just the dark, empty night outside. I closed the curtains, telling myself I was imagining things. But the sound didn't stop. It kept coming, faint but persistent, like something was tapping gently against the glass. It wasn't the wind, because the night was still. It wasn't rain either, because I could see the sky was clear. I stood there for a moment, just listening to the sound. It was as if something was waiting outside, just beyond my sight. We stood there for a while, trying to figure out what was happening. There was no wind strong enough to make the curtain flutter or cause any other sounds. It was like someone was outside, deliberately tapping on the glass. The feeling that something was out there, unseen, became even more terrifying. My mom seemed a little nervous, but she tried to explain it away, saying maybe it was just the old house settling or the wood creaking. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. We started hearing more noises in the following days. Sometimes it was just light tapping, other times it was more scraping, like something was dragging against the glass. We tried to ignore it, but the feeling that something was out there, waiting, was impossible to shake. I began to wonder if I was just imagining it. But both my mom and I began to realize it wasn't just that. Sometimes during the night, the sound would come louder, like something was knocking on the window with force, trying to get in. It reached a point where we couldn't ignore it any longer. One night, while we were sitting in the living room, the sound seemed to intensify in a strange way. It was like something was rubbing against the glass more frantically. I went to the room and opened the door, hoping to finally discover what was going on. The glass was fogged up, like someone had just breathed on it, and the creepiest part was that there were clear marks on the window, like the kind a bird would leave behind with its claws. After that night, my mom decided she didn't want to live there anymore. She was scared, and honestly, so was I. The thought of spending every night in that house, knowing something was tapping at the window and waiting for something, made me feel uneasy. So, we decided to sell the house. We spent weeks trying to sort everything out, and finally, we managed to sell it. The house went to a family who, as far as we know, didn't have any issues with the noises or the presence of the owl. I don't know if they ever heard the sounds, but for us, that house was never the same after that. We left it behind, but I've never been able to forget the feeling that something was still there, just waiting. To this day, whenever I see an owl perched somewhere, I get a chill down my spine. I don't know what it was, whether it was just an animal, whether it was some kind of omen, or something that was waiting for my grandmother to pass. All I know is that after she was gone, it didn't leave completely. And as much as I try to find a logical explanation, I still feel like in some way, that owl never really left. Maybe it physically left, but its presence, that's something I'll never be able to explain. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like to support the community. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you next time.